Welcome to topic 1.7, which is about minerals. All right. We'll be going through a few things that you'll need to know. So you'll need to actually understand what a mineral is, identify rich sources of specific minerals, and explain the function of calcium, iron, and that includes heme and non-heme iron, iodine, sodium, and potassium. You'll need to also be able to know and talk about iodine deficiency, what it can result in, and what issues, and a lot of issues around a lot of those other minerals too. You'll need to be able to explain the factors affecting bioavailability and absorption of minerals, and also describe how micronutrients do interrelate as well. Okay, so first things first, we'll look at exactly what is a mineral. So what is a mineral? And there's a few key pointers about that. So firstly, they're inorganic compounds or elements that don't contain carbon, and they are water soluble as well, and they must be really obtained from your diet. So they must be obtained in your diet. Okay, and they are also inorganic compounds. Okay, they are found on the periodic table, and if they're inorganic, they don't usually contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen as well. Unlike vitamins, minerals are not easily destroyed by poor storage or food processing, and they retain their chemical structure too. And minerals, we do have major and trace minerals by how much the body needs to. And I'll just say there's major and trace. Trace meaning small amounts, major meaning we need this in bigger amounts too. And if we can just sort of rationalize those things, that's calcium, sodium, potassium, magnesium, all right, and trace being iron, zinc, manganese would be another one, boron even. So there's a whole lot of other ones there, and I'll just say iodine would be another. But these are the ones that we're really looking at in year 12. We're not really looking at, nickel, fluorine, things like that so much. All right. And the next thing we're going to sort of recap or cap and look at now are specific minerals. So the first one we'll look at is calcium. All right. First things first with calcium. We need to know about what are some sources of calcium. Okay, so sources of calcium in our diet would be dairy. Okay, and relative to the Australian dietary guidelines and the Guide to Healthy Eating, the food group would be the milk, yogurt, cheese, and or alternatives, which are mostly reduced fat, would be the richest source of calcium. Bony fish are another good example, such as sardines too, and tofu, almonds, seeds like that would have some too, and even some fortified products. But dairy is the richest source as well. Now, calcium is lost every day in body fluids, so it needs to be replaced through the diet. Okay, and I'll just say lost in body fluids. Now, body fluids, that can be urine as well. All right, and needs to be replaced. All right. Now, the next thing I'll just say is predominantly 99% of the body's calcium is stored in bones and teeth. and a really small amount, like 1% in the blood. So high amounts of Ca stored in bones and teeth. 2. All right. Whereas with calcium as well, the intake are set to that we have really does sort of adjust with how our body is growing over time. So someone that's getting peak full bone density in those more formative years between 14 to 18, the adolescent years, will require a bit more than someone that's 30 as well. Okay, and the next thing I'll just sort of go through now, you don't need to know the exact figures, but you need to know a little bit about the calcium RDI with age. So age, and then the RDI as well, which is in milligrams. All right. Now, again, it's not a trace mineral, it's a major mineral, milligrams, it's not micrograms. So let's just go with between the age of, let's go 4 to 8 firstly. We'll go 9 to 12 to 11, 12, or is it, sorry, it should be 9 to 12. And let's go with 14 to 18 and 19 to 50 and 50 plus. Now, this is an estimate, okay? I'm not getting the exact amounts, but for calcium, we're going to see the amount of, calcium with time increase. So here we go. So at 4 to 8, we require about 500 milligrams, 9 to 13, about 700. Between this age, 1300, this age, 1000, this age would need 1300. Now, the thing that you see here is why there's a huge jump from here to here, okay? And why is it it decreases from here and then increases back over here? Well, here's the thing, all right? Calcium's main function is to strengthen bone structures and provide a rigid structure that really supports the body and gives muscle an attachment point to actually have movement. So calcium tends to combine with phosphorus to form calcium phosphate crystals on a matrix of that protein collagen. And during that mineralization process, the crystals become denser and give bones better strength and rigidity as well, making them more rigid in that way. And the reason why throughout life cycles we actually need more is just due to, that is a certain period of growth where, this is here, this is a certain period of growth where there's rapid times of growing. So we will require more calcium in our diet to actually compensate with more of those calcium phosphate crystals being actually produced and made in our bones and teeth. And whereas here in green, this is moments where we're not growing as much, okay, in terms of height and stuff, and not as much calcium is needed. Whereas over here, okay, we're not growing so much, but the thing is our bone structures are now becoming a little bit weaker. And because they're becoming a little bit weaker, we need to actually fight that and allow the bone structures to now not become fragile and porous and actually rebuild through remodeling and having more calcium, okay? So that's why that sort of occurs there. Next thing, some functions of calcium. We've spoken a little bit about it already, but number one is strengthening bone structure. All right, and as I said earlier, so like, how does it strengthen bone structures? Well, it provides a rigid structure that supports the body and gives muscle an attachment point. Write these down as I'm talking about them too. And then calcium combines like with phosphorus as well, which is another mineral to form those calcium phosphate crystals on a matrix of the protein, okay, on the matrix of the protein known as collagen, and that's during the mineralization, these crystals then become denser, and that gives the bone density some more strength and rigidity as well. And bones are continually maintained and rebuilt through remodeling across life cycles, and it allows bones to be strong and dense and prevent them from becoming fragile and porous too. The second one is it actually supports nerve impulses. All right, and muscle contraction and relaxation. Okay, so nerve tissue uses calcium to stimulate nerve triggers. All right, and that will trigger a muscle contraction as well, producing movement. And because the heart is a muscle, calcium will help the heart beating and contracting. Okay, so it supports that. And I'll say and. All right, going on. So bioavailability wise, is the next thing. So roughly 30% of Ca is absorbed that we consumed. Okay. Why does it have a lower bioavailability? Well, firstly, we need to know what bioavailability is. It's the degree at which a nutrient is absorbed and utilized by the body. Okay. What enhances calcium absorption? Enhancer. And I'm just going to say what would be an inhibitor. That doesn't help it. All right. Well, firstly, the enhancer is vitamin D. An inhibitor is things such as excessive sodium, alcohol, and caffeine. All right. So vitamin D increases calcium absorption, and it increases it from the small intestines into the blood, and it actually reduces urinary loss by helping the kidneys reabsorb calcium as well. So that supports it in that way. Why is the other thing like sodium, alcohol, and caffeine inhibitor? Well, excessive sodium and alcohol and caffeine reduces the bioavailability by increasing the amount of calcium lost in urine. So I'm just going to say here, decrease Ca lost in urine, increase Ca, which is calcium, lost in urine. Okay, and that is that about calcium. All right. The next one we'll look at is iron. All right. So what are like your sources of iron in the diet? So your sources are red meat and like leafy greens. Red meat would be your heme source of iron. Leafy greens would be your non-heme source of irons as well. All right, now I'm going to start talking a little bit about red blood cells. Now, red blood cells are really pivotal to iron as well, as red blood cells last for about 115 days. Their iron is recycled back into the bone marrow to build new red blood cells, which is why only a small amount of iron is needed. It is a trace mineral as well. All right. Now, iron is poorly absorbed. All right, the body only needs a small amount, but the RDI of iron is higher than what it needs. Okay, the reason why is because it's not so bioavailable and it's poorly absorbed as well. So, for example, like a male probably only needs about 1 milligram per day in a way, but the RDI is 8 milligrams. So that's because of that poorer absorption, where heme is absorbed better than non-heme. All right. People that need higher needs of iron would be growing children and adolescents as well. All right. People that are menstruating, people that can even be pregnant, so pregnant females who are lactating too, will have greater needs for iron, okay? Because of, blood can be lost through the period, so more blood cells need to actually be produced, and because of that increase in production and increase in need, more iron is needed because it is center to red blood cells, where hemoglobin is the center point which carries around oxygen. All right. Another thing about iron that I've discussed, I'm just going to say here, is there's two forms. Firstly is heme iron, and the next one is non-heme iron. Heme iron is meat sources, and plant sources is non-heme iron. Okay, and it's absorbed at rates of about roughly 7 to 35%. This is absorbed at about 1 to 10%. Oh, we can maybe even go a little bit higher and say 1 to 20%. Okay, all right. Some functions of iron as well. All right. So number one is makes up red blood cells, RBCs, as it's a part of hemoglobin. Okay, and what does hemoglobin do? Well, hemoglobin picks up oxygen as the blood passes through the lungs and delivers it to cells for aerobic respiration, which then produces ATP, which produces energy. And that's why people really low in iron actually can get things such as anemia. Why? Because if you don't have enough iron in your diet, that means that hemoglobin isn't working so as well. Hemoglobin won't be able to pick up the oxygen, and the blood that's passing through the lungs can't really deliver it all that well to cells that need it for aerobic respiration to be made and for ATP energy to be produced as well. It also carries some carbon dioxide waste back to the lungs to be exhaled, and it gives red blood cells, their red color as well, which are, initially when it's deoxygenated doesn't appear red, which has more of a blue color too. Okay. The next one, number two, is it actually is a part of myoglobin, which is in muscle tissue. All right. Now, myoglobin has a really strong affinity for oxygen, really likes oxygen, and it lets it store oxygen in muscles. And during anaerobic respiration, all right, where there's less amount of oxygen, myoglobin tends to release oxygen into the muscle, protecting it from damage, okay, which can be quite bad as well. So this myoglobin process that does support us a lot in anaerobic conditions as well. All right. In terms of bioavailability, okay, iron is poorly absorbed, and exposure to oxygen forms insoluble oxides the gut can't actually absorb. All right, I'm just going to say it's poorly absorbed. All right, an enhancer. Ooh, can I spell? Is vitamin C. All right, what does vitamin C do? It protects iron, especially non-heme iron, from oxidation and boosts the absorption into the bloodstream when it's eaten in the same meal, okay? And an inhibitor is, in particular, when someone's consuming a diet low in iron and absorption aiding nutrients can tend to lower the bioavailability. All right, some responsible compounds are the following. So they can actually be calcium, firstly. They can fight for the same receptor. and oxalates, which are found in some teas, spinach, even strawberries as well. Those can actually, bind to that receptor, and iron isn't really bound in that way. And phytates too, which are found in lentils as well. Okay, going on to the next one, which is iodine. All right, so iodine, again, it's a trace mineral. All right, it's needed in really small amounts, like micrograms, and it can't be stored in such large amounts. Much of Australian food supply is now low in iodine due to low iodine amounts in soils, and because that's sort of because the dairy industry stopped using iron-containing solution as well in that there. The thing with iodine is consuming a diet really low in iodine has a risk of deficiency-related chronic disease such as a goiter, and iodized salt is a big source. So a source equals iodized salt. Another one could be fortified bread. And another one that's more natural is seaweed. Okay. What is the need over time? So for someone that is, increasing in age, will have an increased need of iodine, and people that are pregnant and breastfeeding will have an increased need of iodine too. Okay, this is because iodine is needed by the thyroid gland to make the hormone thyroxine. All right, and what does thyroxine do? It regulates growth and development. And because there's an increase in growth over time, well, here's the thing. That need is met by the increased amount of thyroxine, and would need more made, okay? And that is then released into the blood, and it tells cells to increase metabolism and chemical reactions like aerobic respiration and burn energy to maintain body temperature too, okay? With iodine deficiencies, what can happen is people can feel cold, there can even be a weight gain, all right? Energy is more sort of stored than burnt. And goiters can happen where the thyroid really enlarges and it produces more of that, ball sort of shape around that the jugular there as well, okay? All right, couple more that we'll look at, all right? And we're going to look at, again, some diet-related disease linked to it too. The next one is sodium. All right, so for sodium, 1 in 3 Australians tend to exceed the upper limit for sodium, and the upper limit is 2,300 milligrams. All right, now remember, upper limit sort of just means, don't really exceed this. This is probably sort of like your max amount for the population of people, but some people shouldn't even be going anywhere near this because of their prior health too. So think of it in a way sort of like as your maximum amount per day, okay? Now, if you're consuming over that, you're not going to get a heart attack out of nowhere. It's not going to happen that way, but it won't sort of help over time, and these are reasons why. So, firstly, sodium is a major mineral, okay? All right, as I said, 1 in 3 Australians tend to exceed that, all right? And it's consumed as sodium chloride, which is table salt, and processed foods contain far more sodium than fresh produce too, okay? And most dietary sodium comes from salt added to food, and a lot of discretionary foods have that too. All right, there is also an an adequate intake of 480, I believe, or 460. I reckon 460 to 920 mgs as well. All right. Now, why is sodium so important? Number one is it regulates the volume of extra cellular fluid. And it does this as sodium sits mainly in the extracellular fluid or the body fluid outside cells, and that includes blood. It attracts and holds water by reducing the kidney's ability to remove it in urine. More salt means more water held. With more water held, it increases blood volume, and that raises blood pressure until sodium is no longer needed and excreted in urine. And then just having a look here, if we consistently have exceeding amounts of sodium over time, it can link to hypertension, which means increased blood pressure, increased systolic and diastolic blood pressure, okay? Now, that's because the more salt that's going to be consumed over a serious period of time means the more water's held, the more increase this is in the blood volume, the more raising of blood pressure that happens. And the more the blood pressure is raised, over time, the average blood pressure is going to continually and consistently be raised, having high blood pressure, which is hypertension, okay? Number two, the number two use, see, you need some amounts to regulate that volume, but you consistently don't need too much of it, is muscle contraction and nerve impulse too. Now, muscle nerve cells do make those electrical impulses by controlling the charged ions, so the charged elements which have lost electrons, as a part of the sodium-potassium pump in membrane. So that's a protein pump that can spit out, bring in sodium, potassium. In contrast, what happens with here is the pump opens, sodium rushes in, and creates then an electrical impulse or a contraction, and then potassium then follows, switches off the signal, and allows for relaxation. So pretty much, sodium, Na, contraction, all right, K, relaxation. K being potassium, okay, Na is sodium. And that the ions are repumped back, sodium out, potassium in, to reset levels before the next impulse as well. So it's really, really important in that too. Okay, and as I said earlier, hypertension is one thing that can be linked to excessively high sodium. And if we go back, and I should have said this earlier with excessively low amounts of calcium, but two things can be osteoporosis, which is more so in your, older generation, and rickets, which is bow-legging in younger generation because of that too, all right? And then finally, we will look at potassium. Okay. Now, it's really rich in unprocessed whole fruits and vegetables, all right? So I'm just going to say sources, fruits and veg, okay? Bananas, spinach, broccoli, sweet potatoes, some beans and some meats. Beans, meats, all right? And here's the function of potassium. Number one, it also regulates the volume of extracellular fluids. Okay, how does it do this? Well, potassium regulates how much sodium enters and exits the cell. All right. If sodium around the outside is really high, the kidneys retain a lot more water to maintain the sodium to water ratio as well. Okay, and number 2 is it regulates muscle contractions as well. Muscle contractions and nerve impulses. All right, and how does it do that? Well, it's similar to what we said with sodium. It's needed for electrical impulses or contractions to happen to travel along nerves and for muscle movement. And it works with sodium to create an electrical charge via that sodium-potassium pump, okay, which is embedded in the cell membrane, okay? And this sodium-potassium exchange allows membranes to help maintain a steady heartbeat too, okay? Now, finally, some micronutrient relationships to remember, all right? Vitamin C increases non-heme iron bioavailability. All right. Calcium does reduce the amount of iron availability as well. Vitamin D increases calcium bioavailability. All right. And sodium, potassium do tend to work together in that sodium-potassium pump for fluid balance as well. All right. Hope this video helps. Good luck, and make sure to get questions 1 through to 7 done in chapter 1.7.